Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Red Hour. I'm the Dead Man, and this is a show that I do twice a week where I insert a little bit of chaos into Star Trek by reviewing a random episode. So, uh, today's episode is Deep Space Nine, Season 7, Episode 22, Tacking into the Wind. So it starts off, you see a screen of a Jem'Hadar ship, and it's blown up. And this is the point in the show where there's a Cardassian revolution going on, or rebellion against the Dominion. So this is a part where we're winding down the Dominion War. So if you've watched Deep Space Nine, they go to war with a race of shapeshifters that create like super soldiers and clones. So if you haven't seen it, that's like starting in, I think, the fourth season is when the war starts, and then the seventh season it ends at the end. Uh, so there's a rebellion or a rebel group of Cardassians that are teaming up with Starfleet, and Odo is helping them as well. And Kira is like their sort of leader, their Starfleet liaison, or whatever you want to call it. And she shows them like there was problems with the last mission where they blow up this ship. It was dangerous. It was kind of reckless. And she's like kind of arguing with this Cardassian, and Damar's there, and they sort of duke it out, and she's trying to like discipline them because at one point he says somebody's name out loud, and she's like, "No, you don't say people's names in case you're captured. You basically, so if you're questioned, you're not going to be able to say, oh, so and so was the leader of this attack, and da 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 da. And I assume, I don't know where the writers got that idea. I don't know if that's how Al Qaeda operates, or terrorist groups operate, or maybe in Vietnam. I don't know where they got that idea, but what I like about Deep Space Nine is, and I don't know much about war or stuff like that, but it seems like the writers, at least did some homework in trying to get it depicted in a good way, or not a good way, but like like make it realistic. If you go to Discovery, there's a war with the Klingons, which we barely see, and they really barely even a thing. And they started off with this, and wouldn't that be cool if they did a show, say like in the TOS era, where there's a war with the Klingons, or maybe or the Earth Romulan War, before the Federation gets founded. But they don't do that, or they haven't done it. And in Discovery, like, it kicks off with Michael Burnham, in a mutiny, basically, and the way it's played out, it's barely registers. Okay. But anyway, that sorry, there's always going to be some sort of discussion because looking back on past episodes of Star Trek, you see a lot of times it's way much better. And I've gave Strange New World some praise, but I've also gave it, some things that I don't like, and um, I think that comparing the differences is nuts, especially when you get into like Deep Space Nine, which has some excellent writing, and and I'm going to talk about the dialogue and stuff in this episode. But anyway, Odo comes in and gives Kira an update on like some of the things that they've been doing, and and Odo's like he's got an illness that they think Section 1 gave him, and he spread it to the founders, and he's sort of like turning into mud or whatever, and just kind of falling apart. He's in bad shape, and he has to go take a rest, and then Garrick comes in, and they talk for a little bit. He's like, I don't want you to tell Kira about my condition. Basically, he's been doing a lot of changing into different shapes and forms and stuff. And every time he does that, it makes his sickness worse. And Garrick agrees and goes out, and leaves him alone. As he's walking away, he starts to say something, and Odo's like, look, if I don't want your sympathies or Kira's sympathies, I especially don't want yours. And Garrick, basically acknowledges, okay, I understand, and leaves the room. And that's the teaser. So back on Deep Space Nine, Galron is there in Cisco's office, and he's complaining about General Martok, and how he is losing these battles, and Galron's basically sending people on these reckless battles that like deep into like their Dominion territory, and he's pissed off that it's not working, and it's almost like he's trying to do it for like glory. He's more interested in the glory of himself than protecting the Klingon territory, the Klingon, and more and he has an alliance with the Federation, so he's putting people's lives at risk for no reason, and Cisco's pissed off about this and basically tells him as much. And then there's another scene where Bashir is like working on a cure, and Chief O'Brien, basically is like he wants to track down Section 31 because they're pretty sure that they're the one that gave Odo this disease, and he's like basically trying to tell him, look, you're not gonna be able to find a cure. The founders couldn't find a cure. You're not gonna. So there's there's not much of a chance that you're going to be able to find one either. And Bashir's not having any of it, and he, he needs more time, and he says something like that Section 31 had been around for over 300 years, and that if we try to basically they want to tell Cisco. I think Chief says he wants to tell Cisco, and then Cisco can get the word out, and Bashir's like, well, if Section 31 gets word of this, they're just going to go into deeper hiding and stuff. They've been around for 300 years, which I had forgotten about this, because in Enterprise, Section 31 is there. And I thought they introduced the idea that Section 31 was in that time in Enterprise, but apparently not. They already introduced this idea in Deep Space Nine. So I was wrong about that. And if you think about organizations that have been around for a long time, there's the Illuminati, which is a real thing, and the Freemasons. They've been around for hundreds of years, so it's not outside of the realm of possibility that a organization can be around for hundreds of years. And if you look at the Freemasons, that goes back to the Knights Templar, and which has connected to stonemasons in Egypt, and so we're talking like thousands of years, possibly, in one form or another. So that, I thought that was interesting, and like I said, Chief wants to inform Cisco, and Bashir's like, no, I'm going to keep working on this cure. So they kind of like argue a little bit, but it's not like too bad. They're not yelling at each other. They are talking like adults, and that's what one of the things I wanted to talk about is in the most recent episode of Strange New Worlds, they spend the first 10 minutes talking like teenagers, like it's in high school. And I couldn't stand listening to that talk, because Nurse Chapel's like talking to Leon, and she's like, I hope Spock is doing all right, and he doesn't have any hard feelings because I'm seeing Roger Corby and blah blah, like high school CW crap. And then I'm watching this episode, and it's so refreshing because they're talking like adults to each other. Last time I said that I think Ezri's in this episode, which, surprise, shocker, she's probably going to be in most episodes of season 7. But somewhere in my brain, I knew that she was important to this episode, but I couldn't remember why. I couldn't even remember what this episode was about. And turns out she was. She is important in this episode. And when we get there, I'll talk about that. But as I said back, I kind of flip things around. It starts off with Bashir first, and then Gowron. So Gowron's all pissed off at Martok, and Cisco's pissed off at Gowron because he's putting the overall team in danger. The mission, the overall goal is to end to end this war and not seek glory, for for your own greatness, so that you can look like a hero at the end of the war. So back on Cardassia, in the female founders, they're in her office. Or I don't know. Are they on Cardassia or are they? I think they are. Okay. Because they show the outside of the building, so I guess yeah. Wayoon is there, and the founder is he's talking about these successful battles that they've won and stuff like that. And she's like, she doesn't want to hear about that. She wants to hear about this rebellion that's going on, and basically tells him to, to start interrogating, scientists and teachers and just regular everyday people, and make things harder for the Cardassians. Sort of, because they're basically space Nazis, so it's, and the Russians did shit like this too, the Soviets. And so they're drawing from history, which is great. It's what you should do, especially with Star Trek, when you're trying to tell like morality tells and allegories and stuff. I mean, that's what you should do. You should draw from history. You should do research, and if you want to tell us a certain story, take the time to research what you want to tell, instead of, again, like Strange New Worlds, just going around copying different franchises and then piecemealing a story together. It seems to me like somebody in the writings room, and I'm guessing it's Kristen Berry or whatever her name is. She wrote Star Trek books, novels. Kristen Beyer, that's what it is. So she knows like the lore, I guess, to a certain extent. And some of them probably know like surface level. The other ones probably know like surface level stuff. And they'll have like ideas that almost seem like they would be good and they would work. And some episodes are good. I can't stress that enough. That some episodes are good, but they, I think the ones that I was saying were good, I might have been giving them too much credit, because looking back on this episode of Deep Space Nine, it's like so much more elevated. TNG is so much more elevated. Even Voyager, even Enterprise has some like Enterprise is not the greatest example, but so they'll have like some elements of a good story, a good science fiction tale, a good allegory, a good whatever, and then they throw in the crap writing where they want to have all this stupid CW type stuff, because apparently they're trying to reach the Gen Z, that audience, but I don't think they're getting it, because they don't want to listen to that teenage crap either, like CW writing. When I was a teenager, Deep Space Nine was on, and I didn't look for like that type of writing there. And I keep seeing people saying they're copying Buffy. I never watched Buffy, but if that's what they're doing, they're doing a poor job of it, and that time has already passed. Okay, and people are sick of like Joss Whedon humor. I mean, even James Gunn is getting slammed for Superman, having it, it was too jokey or too James Gunny, and I thought it was too jokey. But so it just kind of irritates me that they sort of have this, they like almost have it, and then they just drop the ball with the teenage stuff. Anyway, Don't know how I got started on that tangent, but that's what happens here on the Red Hour. Uh, so basically, the female founder, she wants to stomp out this rebellion, and Wei Yun like assures her that they're gonna take care of it very very quickly. And the Breen is there, and he says something. He's like whatever they say in their little with their masks, and she's like, "Oh, he's right. You did assure us that something was going to happen, and it didn't happen, or that Damar would never turn on them." That's what she says. You assured us that Damar was loyal, and he's kind of like, well, I didn't think that was going to happen. He seemed loyal to me. So we're back with the rebellion and the Breen. They're talking about this Breen weapon, and I didn't hear what they said, or what they called it, or what it was actually doing. And I have it written down for later on. So when I get to that point, we'll tell you what the weapon is. They're talking about this weapon, and the Federation is having trouble counteracting it, and so they basically need to steal one, take it to the Federation, and let Starfleet, or take it to Starfleet and see if they can figure out how to counteract it. So they basically need a Kardashian shuttle to get inside of this facility where it's being housed, and so they have a discussion of their plan, and Kira's like says, "Oh, and I need a team of Garrick, Damar, that I forget the asshole Cardassian guy, herself, and Odo." And Garrick pulls her to the side and says, "Hey, I need to tell you, you don't need to take Odo on this mission. He's been hiding his condition from you, and it gets worse as the more times he changes form, it gets worse." And she knows about it. She's like, "I already know," but she's has this discussion about if Odo wants to pretend that it's not bothering him, and he wants to go on doing these missions, and that makes him feel better, and that makes him feel important or whatever, then I'm gonna keep pretending that I don't know that he's hurt as bad as he is, and I'm gonna let him go on these missions. So again, another good conversation. It's a very adult conversation. It's not, you're not sitting there like Michael Burnham crying. That's how I got on that last tangent. Okay, the conversations. They're not sitting on like Michael Burnham, crying and hugging each other. These people are professionals. They've, Starfleet is basically like a military, even though people will argue that it's not. It is. It has a military aspect to it, and you're supposed to be professional. You're not supposed to be chilling with your captain, like Pike does. I mean, it's one thing to have, that poker party at the end of TNG. That's one thing. But to be on the bridge and just sort of rolling your eyes when somebody says something, and you're a junior officer or what, I don't know, I'd have to go back to all the times in on Strange New Worlds where Pike says something, or somebody of authority says something, or somebody higher ranking says something, and the ladies are just kind of like, how dare this man tell me what to do? Like that type of stuff. It's like, fucking what? Grow the fuck up. What fucking world are you in? That's the way they think. That's the way those people think. That's why they inject it into the writing. They don't try to just write a good story. They say, I have a message that I'm going to put. I'm going to put my modern politics. Don't call me a she. I go by they, them. That type of stuff. It's like you're more concerned about your message than you are character development and story. And that's why we end up with what we got. And that's why you lost at least half of your audience, if not more. And you should be thankful there's people like me that still watch this, just because I try to give every show a fair chance, and I'm a completionist, I guess. But according to the guy the other day, I'm not a fucking fan. So back on the station, Martok is healing. He's in the hospital bed. Cisco calls Worf to his office and asks about Martok, and Worf says, that Dr. Bashir says that he'll make a full recovery. And Martok is missing an eye, by the way. And I'm going to do it on Wednesday after the Red Hour. I'm going to do this last Strange New Worlds episode. But real quick, in that episode, there's a guy that loses both of his eyes in an explosion. And they have like this visor thing that can just recreate a whole new eye. But for some reason, Martok and Geordi can't build new eyes. 100 years later, they can't do that. That's it's like I said before. They get some things right. For every right thing they get something wrong, something continuity breaking, or canon breaking, or whatever you want to call it. It just doesn't make sense. Back to the episode. Sorry, there multiple rants here tonight on the Red Hour. Cisco, discusses the situation with Worf, and he's like, Worf explains that sometimes there are situations where the Chancellor has not put the Klingons ahead of himself, where he just seeks out, it wouldn't be the first time, right? And he's like, Cisco's like, well, something's got to be done, you've got to try to do something. And Worf tells him, well, I have a plan, I have a solution, but it's not going to be easy. So back with the rebellion, Kira and the Carson. So Kira's like she's like at her desk, whatever you want to call it, and she's going over the mission or whatever she's doing. And the asshole Cardassian dude comes up to her, and he's like, basically like, I know why you joined this group. You just want an opportunity to kill more Cardassians. And she's kind of like taken back by this, and And if you go back to, there's episodes where, she like didn't want to join the resistance on Cardassia or on Bajor at first, but was kind of like forced into it, like they treated them so badly that forced her hand, and and she didn't like. There's an episode where Dax talks about, do you know how many people you killed, and she doesn't want to talk about it, so that it's not that she likes going out killing Cardassians. So it's kind of offending for this guy to say this shit to her. But he's trying to get her riled up, and he succeeds, and they fight, and she kicks his ass and has him in a chokehold. Now, I'm going to say this. A lot of times you'll hear me complain about, a 110-pound woman beating up a big dude. And it happens a lot lately in media. Back in the 90s, it didn't happen so much. And in this episode, she takes some punches. It's not like she's just like Superwoman, taking this guy down easily. And yes, she's small and whatnot, but she's had experience with Cardassians before, so it's more believable. It's not 100% accurate. In real life, Nina Visitor probably could not take down this actor. Okay, I admit it. But at least in this situation, it's a little more believable. With Michael Burnham, she's like beating up, Klingons left and right, and and all kinds of stuff, and hardly ever takes any punches. So he threatens her at the end of the fight. He's like, before this war is over, and she interrupts him and she says, "You know where to find me. You'll know where to find me." And then he walks away, and then Garrick comes out, and he says, he's going to try to kill you before this war is over. So you better get to him before he gets to you. And then, she's like, so Garrick was there the whole time. And she's like, well, thanks for all the help. And he's like, it looked like you had it under control. So back on the station, Worf is talking to Martok, and he wants Martok to challenge Gowron, and Martok's like not having it. He's like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm a loyal soldier, I'm not a politician. Gowron's our leader, and I'm going to be loyal to him. And Worf kind of pushes it a little bit more, and he gets mad, and he's like, no, not. He's like, no. So then now it's time for the rebel, their mission. So they're in a Starfleet shuttle, and Odo and Kira are kind of talking, and she goes and says, I'm going to go get a Ratchicino. I'll never be able to pronounce that correctly. Take over the helm. So she goes back there, and Damar and Garrick are there, and they're talking, and she's like, what's up? And Damar's like, well, the 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 founders or the Dominion found my family, found out where they were, and killed them all. And he's like, you know, they weren't even part of this resistance, and the founders know that. Wayoon knows that. You know, he could have Wayoon could have warned him, because Wayoon is a bad guy. He's truly a bad guy, but there's some parts of him that are kind of good, in a weird way. Kind of like, there's that famous story of like World War One, where it was like Christmas Eve, and like these, the Germans are on one side and the French and the English are on the other side, and they have like a little mini truce, and come together just because it's Christmas, and then resume fighting, the very next day. It's that's a crazy story. It's crazy. Today, you're an enemy. You're an evil person if you just have the wrong political opinion, If you voted for, Trump, or whoever you voted for, if you voted for Biden, you're the enemy, and you're not to be even talked. I can't even talk to you. I'm not even going to talk to you. We're not going to talk out our ideas. You're dead to me. You might as well be Satan, So you don't see that much anymore. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. And then Kira. Damar says, like, who does something like that? And Kira's like, yeah, Damar, what kind of people would do something like that? Basically saying, you guys did that shit on Bajor when you were occupying Bajor, and he kind of looks at her, and you think he's going to get mad and basically be like, fuck you, but he just looks at her and he walks away. And Kira's like, man, she's like, feels bad. She's like, I probably should have said that, which again, today people would be like, I'm glad I fucking said that. I'm glad. But this is why this is part of Star Trek. Is like, even though we have differences, we can still get along and find a peaceful, way to talk to people and stuff, and even towards the end, spoiler, Odo joins, the founders, and creates a peace, But anyway, Garrick says to Kira, no, it's good that you said that, because basically he's more receptive to it now than he would have been before, and now he's even more. We're not going to get Cardassia back. We're not going to get the old Cardassia back. We need people like him that can forge a new way. Ducat was an asshole and an egomaniac, and he cared more about himself than Cardassia, and these are the discussions that we're having about the Klingon Empire, the Cardassians, these are important discussions, that you should have. Germany is not the same Germany as they were before. They're not the same Germany as they were, throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I mean, the wall fell, and they became reunited, and they now they are very they are into like censorship and stuff, but what I'm saying, like they're not the same people as they were 80 years ago. So back on the station, Esri and Worf, and those are the kind of conversations that we need to have. You're not going to see that in New Trek, and so because of those conversations, I think people that watched old Trek can probably forge ahead in the future without being like complete fucking dickheads. But now you have a whole generation of people that have never been exposed to these type of ideas, these type of conversations, and that's a shame. And we're not getting it with New Trek. So the audience that they're chasing after, if they are watching, which most of them are not, they're not getting something to think about, something to aspire to. How many people in work for NASA that are like, oh, I watched Star Trek and that made me want to be an astronaut, or that made me want to be a scientist. You're not getting that now. You're not going to get that. Anyway, Esri and Worf are on the promenade, and they're talking, and Worf basically, wants to know her opinion on, like, trying to get the leadership, trying to get Gowron to see things his way, or to just do better, Chancellor. And at first she's hesitant because she's not Klingon. She's not like Dax, she's not like Jadzia. And, she doesn't know much about the overall situation, but Worf reminds her that she's still part of the House of Martok, that they had decided that, and that Martok likes her. And so he kind of like pushes the issue a little bit, and so she's kind of frank with him, and she's like, look, the Empire's dying, and it's filled with corrupt people. It's like the Roman Empire. Well, it's like the United States now. It's like the High Councils, all they're all corrupt people. And she asks him, who was the last leader of the High Council that you respected? And he doesn't really give an answer, but clearly nobody. Like maybe at one time he respected Gowron, maybe. He helped put him in power. But and then she asked him, how many times have you had to cover up, crimes and been told that it's for the good of the Empire. These people, and she says, Worf, you're the most honorable person I've ever known, and for you to not, to still go along with this says something, says something not good, something bad. So again, another adult conversation between two adults. They're not crying, they're not yelling at each other, they're not, it's okay to get mad. Okay, Morph gets mad at her a little bit of, a little bit, because he's hearing things that he doesn't want to hear. But she needs to tell him this, and frankly, Jadzia would have probably done the same. She told him stuff that he didn't want to hear also, and it would piss him off. And so I like I just love the conversations, and the thing about that conversation, and it kind of, I haven't watched this episode in a while, and I wasn't a big fan of Esri when she first came on, but then she grew on me, and like this type of conversation is one of those that's it's like, oh wow, that I like that, and it kind of made me a little bit emotional. I know, like I didn't like cry, but I was like, kind of had the feelings, And again, we don't get those conversations on Strange New Worlds, you know. You get a little bit with Pike and Mbinga, where he almost sounds like a captain, you know. He almost sounds like a friend, but then it's undercut by the crap that they throw at us. Uh, in the teenager talk. So, on board the Dominion facility, they're not allowed to bring in weapons. The Dominion doesn't trust Cardassians that much anymore. And basically, Kira is being brought in as a fake prisoner. And the guard checks out the thing. They give him the guard the thing. He's like, oh, this checks out. As they're walking away, he's like, good luck, Damar. So he knows it's that he's in on it. And I imagine a lot of people are sick of the Dominion at this point. So it turns out Odo is like the handcuffs. So Odo like slips out of there and sneaks off. So they get to the room where they need to be, and there's the female Vorta. She's in charge. And again, they bring Kira in as a prisoner, and they basically Garrick is like, oh, I think you should probably interrogate this prisoner. And she's like, I haven't even been told about this. And they say that she had been rounded up like just like a day ago or something, and that so they would the paperwork just came through or whatever. And at that time, you see the female founder come in, and she's like talking to them and takes the guard's gun and talks about how it's a nice new rifle that they've been producing, and hands the gun to Garrick and is like, what do you think of this? And he like mows them all down, and then it turns out it was actually Odo. And Odo's like, you didn't have to kill them all. And then so basically they got 30 to the Breen weapon is not ready yet. It hasn't been installed yet. So they're like, how long is it going to take? And then they say it's like 30 to 45 minutes. And the asshole Cardassian guy is like, we don't have time for that. We need to get the hell out of here now. And they want to speak to the female Vorta. So Kira pretends to be the female Vorta, and basically it's like that sort of like that chat on New Hope, and Han's like talking to the stormtroopers and stuff. It's not as funny, but it's sort of like that. And so then then there's a part where Odo like lies down and he's all, melty, and Kira goes to talk to him, and that asshole dude comes up, and he's basically like, we need to get out of here now. Basically he's gonna shoot her, and Garrett's like, oh no, you're not, and points the phaser. I think that's actually later on, because I had a Mexican standoff written down, and I'm not seeing that anyway. But so back on the station, Bashir's still working on the cure, and Chief O'Brien comes in and brings him some food, and he basically apologizes for the other day, and Bashir's like, it's okay, no big deal. Like two men would do. I don't know about most people, but I'll get mad at somebody for like 10 minutes, and then it's over. Some people stay mad. I don't know. I mean, I think women do it more than men. So O'Brien's like asking some questions about Section 31 and like what he thought they would do if they found out that you had a cure, and he's like, I don't know what they would do, and he basically says, what if you send a message to Starfleet Medical saying that you had found a cure, and basically set a trap for them so that they would show up, and then you can basically capture them and interrogate them, and he's like, well, what if they don't know? What if they weren't the ones that that infected Odo? Well, Brian's like, well, they probably would know who did. So then it's back to Galron, and he has another bad plan that they're sitting around a table, and it's Worf and Martok and some other Klingons, I guess higher up generals, and they're like, he has this bad plan that obviously it's way deep in like Breen territory, maybe not their home world, but it's like a deep into their territory, heavily guarded, all this stuff, and Martok's not saying anything. Well, he argues a little bit, and Galron's like, are you saying you're not a true warrior? Trying to goad him and stuff. And Martok stands up, and at first you think that he's going to challenge him, but he's like, no. He basically says, I will do what a warrior has to do, And that's when Worf stands up, and he's like, he challenges, Galron. And basically, for Klingons, what does that mean? It's a fight to the death. And whoever wins remains Chancellor. So, they have a really good fight. And guess what? Worf wins. So they start chanting, Worf, 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 and he's like, no. I want to say that, the Empire going forward has to be different, and blah, blah, blah. And the one man I know, the one man that I know that can do this job is General Martok, and he hands Martok the cloak or whatever it is, and Martok's like, I'm not I'm not a politician, and I don't seek this out. And I'm going to read a quote that I wrote down where Worf says, Kalis said, "Great men do not seek power; they have power thrust upon them," and which is great quote and very much true, very much true, and just a personal note in my life, a couple years ago, I was looking for a job, and I was just looking for like a line cook position, and I saw this opportunity for a management position, and I was like, I'll try, but I don't think I'm going to get this job. And I went to the interview, thought the interview went well. Then I went to another interview after that, just for a line cook position. And that interview was kind of stale. They didn't ask a bunch of questions. And I had seen that guy before, probably a few years prior. And he was kind of an asshole then, and he was an asshole that time. And then as soon as I get home from that interview, my former boss sent me a text message saying she wants to offer me the position. And I remember thinking of this quote, because I'm not seeking out power, I'm not seeking out management. It just, I thought I'd give it a try. And I did. I thought of this quote. That's kind of silly. I know, I'm not talking, but sometimes you have people say in the military or whatever, and they get out and they maybe they're going to political rallies or something or whatever, and they're basically this guy that I'm going to this rally for is saying all the wrong things, and he's stupid, and it seems like he's I don't like his ideas, and maybe over time he's asking questions and all this stuff, and then eventually people start seeing that, and they hey, you should run for Congress. And he's like, I don't know about that, and then enough people say that, and he's and he decides to do it, and wins. That type of shit happens. I mean, I don't know how often, but it happens. So that's the idea, is you're not seeking power. You're not seeking to just rule over people. You're not seeking to just be in charge and take lobbyist money and, stuff like that. You're hoisted upon it. Anyway, back at the Dominion facility, I can't read. Odo. I can't read my own handwriting. Odo is falling apart again, and that's where they have the Mexican standoff. So, douchebag is pointing phaser at Kira. Garrick is pointing phaser at douchebag, and Damar is pointing phaser at Garrick. And Damar's basically put the gun down. We've got important work to do. We got to get out of here. All this stuff. We have a mission to do. And he's having none of it, and he's no, I should just kill her. We can get out of here now instead of having to wait and blah blah blah. And that's where I think what Kira said to Damar after his family was slaughtered, I think this is him realizing that we can't go forward with people like this. So he kills the guy and walks away, and he was like, "That was my best friend," and that's pretty poignant. I mean, and that's basically where it ends. The credits roll, because this is part of a bigger story arc, and the closing of the war. There's only what 4 more episodes in that season, I guess. Um, but overall, good fights, good dialogue, good story beats. There's character development with Damar. Um, there's a point right at that point, at that ending scene, where Kira tells Odo that she knew that he was that bad off. That he was hiding. He was hiding. She knew, so she tells him that. There's stakes. They're when they're doing their mission. These guys juggled 3 different stories in one episode and pulled it off like pretty good, like pretty flawlessly, I'd say. There's nothing I really can complain about. It's not a 10 because I would put that more like Trial and Tribulations or something. But a solid 8. Maybe even more than that. Just as a standalone episode. It's not a standalone episode, but I'm gonna count it as one. And so, now we get to the portion of the night where we choose what random episode I'm going to watch. But first, I'm gonna go and take a look at the chat. Now. Okay, so we have Gavin Blackburn is here, says hello. Michelle Ferry says hello. Hello, and they're saying hello to each other. I'm glad it's nice weather in England. Old Trek required you to think. New Trek is an insult to your intelligence. Amen, brother. They would give you 2 different options and often would not tell you which thing is the right one. They would allow you to come up with your own conclusion. And yes, it would make me think. I would be watching a episode even now. I watch an episode and I'm like, oh wow, I didn't think about that before, which is part of the reason I'm doing this in the first place. New Trek rags on classic Trek, thinking it's superior. It's nowhere near its level. The thing about New Trek is, they basically think it's outdated, and they think because it has, TOS in particular, the effects are not, the sets are kind of goofy, or they're not up to modern standards or whatever. So that makes it bad. They don't consider the story itself. And somebody was talking about Star Trek Continues. And Star Trek Continues kept those same sets and told really good stories, you know, and I don't need those. I don't need the set to look $1,000, man. Just tell me a good story. It's nice. It looks good on my TV. But if you're not telling me a good story, then what's the point of those nice looking sets? You know, and you make no effort to make it look like the old Enterprise. I mean, you're a fan. No one can say if you're a fan or not accept you. Yeah, I mean, they can't. People like that can't take criticism or they like the show and they don't like TOS, so they're like, it's. I always find it that once you're like calling people stupid or calling people names, you no longer have an argument. And yeah, I call people stupid and shit like that too, and I say things are stupid. But if you're trying to convince me that an episode is good and it's good for these reasons, and then I say I disagree with you, and then you just call me a doo-doo head. Where are we? Okay, I'm a doo-doo head, but that doesn't change the fact. That doesn't change what the things that I'm pointing out. DJ Play Nice, good evening. And DJ Play Nice says hello to everybody else. Alright. And this episode has gone longer than I thought. So I closed out, as I often do. I decided to just completely close out that random generator because 90% of the time I end up messing it up anyway. And so we're going to do randomize me. I can never get the randomize me. TNG Season 1, Episode 19, Coming of Age. I'm drawing a blank on that one. I'm guessing it has to do with maybe either Wesley or one of the kids. One of the random kids. Maybe. Don't know. No, I'm completely drawing a blank. Yeah. Anyway, I want to thank everyone that's come out tonight. Wesley Crusher. I don't know. DJ Play Nice, Michelle Ferry, and Gavin Blackburn. Anybody that is lurking, and anybody that watches this in the future, thanks for coming out. I'll be back on Sunday with Wesley tries to enter. I actually like that one. Anyway, that's gonna be it for me. I'll see you guys Sunday, where we watch where I talk about Coming of Age. Have a good night, and I'll see you then.